Welcome back, everyone. It's time for your daily cybersecurity news roundup. We'll be diving into some pretty alarming trends today. Phishing schemes are getting even smarter. In fact, info stealers are setting their sights on password managers, and there's even malware out there disguised as everyday tools you use. Are you ready to unpack all this with me?
Absolutely. Let's jump right in. Why don't we start with this phishing technique that's gaining traction? It's called device code phishing. Bruce Schneier actually highlighted this on his blog recently, and it's a really sneaky way attackers are exploiting a feature that's meant to be convenient.
Yeah, it definitely plays on our trust in legitimate processes. Can you break down how it works for us?
Sure, think about when you're logging into a service on your smart TV. Instead of struggling to type in your credentials on a remote, you're often given a code to enter on a website.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. So device code phishing basically takes advantage of this exact thing. Attackers trick you into entering that code, but it's on a fake website.
So you think you're connecting your TV, but you're actually giving your login info to the bad guys.
Exactly. Ars Technica even reported that Russian spies are using this technique to compromise Microsoft accounts.
Oh, wow. And it's not just individual users at risk either, is it?
You're right. It makes you wonder if this could be used to target corporate accounts as well, especially now with the rise of bring your own device policies.
That's a good point. And speaking of targets, we need to discuss another disturbing trend. The surge in info stealers that are targeting password managers. Picus Security reported a threefold increase, and that's alarming.
It is very alarming.
It seems kind of counterintuitive at first. Why would attackers even go after password managers? Aren't those supposed to protect us from credential theft?
Well, they are, but think about it this way. If you compromise a password manager, it's like winning the lottery. You get access to every single credential, from social media to online banking. It's a single point of failure that can give attackers access to a victim's entire digital life.
Oh, I see what you mean. That makes a lot of sense. And it seems like these attacks are getting even more sophisticated.
Right? They're targeting lots of different password stores, from the ones built into browsers to dedicated password managers. Think LastPass 1Password. They're even going after cloud secrets management stores used by businesses.
So even organizations that are trying to do the right thing and manage their secrets securely are in danger.
Unfortunately, yes. And speaking of organizations, there's a pretty concerning story out of South America that involves a new malware family that's targeting a foreign ministry. CSO Online covered this, and it seems to be the work of a sophisticated group.
Yeah, what caught my eye was that they actually have versions of this malware for both Windows and Linux systems. That suggests some serious resources and planning went into this, way beyond your average cybercriminal.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely points to a nation-state-backed operation, but what's really interesting is how this malware uses living off the land tactics.
For those who aren't familiar, can you explain what living off the land means in this context?
Sure. It basically means that the attackers are using legitimate tools that are already on the victim system to do their dirty work. Like in this case, they were observed using winnershost.exe. It's a part of Windows Remote Management, and they use it to download files.
So they're blending in with the normal system operations, making it harder for traditional security solutions to detect them.
Exactly. And they even took it a step further. They used a renamed version of a legitimate Windows debugging tool called cdb.exe to actually execute their malicious code.
That's pretty clever. It's like they're hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. But here's the real kicker. They actually leveraged the Microsoft Graph API for communication.
You mean that same API developers use to access data and services within the Microsoft Cloud?
Yep, you got it. They steal an API token, and it gives them the ability to talk to their command and control server without raising any red flags. Symantec actually highlighted this tactic in a report last year, and it seems to be gaining popularity.
It's a very stealthy way to blend in with legitimate traffic and take data right under the nose of security tools. And to make matters worse, this malware doesn't just stop there. It has other features for staying put and covering its tracks.
That's right. It can install a hidden TCP listener, delete files securely, and even manipulate the Windows firewall to create a backdoor.
It's a stark reminder that today's cybercriminals aren't just opportunistic script kiddies. These are highly skilled and motivated adversaries with sophisticated toolkits.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really critical question. How can individuals and organizations protect themselves with all these evolving threats?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Well, one thing we need to focus on, especially with the rise in all this info-stealer activity, is a password security. CSO Online had a great article about this. They highlighted a threefold increase in attacks targeting password managers.
It's a major concern. While password managers are designed to enhance our security by storing and managing credentials securely, they can become a single point of failure if compromised. And attackers know this.
right? They're developing malware specifically to steal credentials from these tools. We've seen this with Redline Stealer and Limma Stealer, for example.
Exactly. Redline is often spread through phishing campaigns and can steal credentials from tons of sources, not just password managers. And then there's Limma. That one's particularly concerning because it's offered as malware as a service, so it's easier for less skilled attackers to get a hold of.
And it's not just about stealing basic login info. Some info stealers can capture even more sensitive data, like credit card information, cryptocurrency wallets, and session cookies.
Yeah, session cookies let them hijack active sessions and completely bypass the need for credentials. It's a powerful technique that can compromise even accounts that are protected by strong passwords and multi-factor authentication.
So what's driving this trend of targeting password managers?
It's partly driven by the increasing security measures that have been implemented in operating systems. Traditional credential dumping techniques aren't as effective, so attackers are turning to less protected targets. Password managers often only require user-level access to compromise, making them a more appealing target.
And the rewards for these attackers are huge. Imagine gaining access to a password manager that has credentials for everything from social media accounts to online banking. It's like a goldmine.
And it's not just a hypothetical either. RailyQuest, a threat intelligence firm, reported over a 50% increase in InfoStealer logs that had stolen credentials. Those were being sold on the dark web in 2024 compared to the year before. This surge in available credentials is fueling initial access brokers. They specialize in providing access to compromised systems for a fee. It's a dangerous cycle.
It really is. It paints a pretty sobering picture of the evolving threat landscape. It seems like attackers are always one step ahead, finding creative ways to exploit new technologies and user behaviors. But what can we do about it? We can't just give up.
Absolutely not. There are definitely steps individuals and organizations can take to lessen these risks, and that's what we'll be diving into next.
Okay, great. Let's take a quick break and we'll be back to discuss some strategies for staying ahead of the curve in this ever-changing world of cybersecurity.
So let's get back to talking about how we can actually protect ourselves against these ever-evolving threats. It's not all doom and gloom, you know? While attackers are innovating, security professionals are too.
Okay, that's good to hear. So where do we start? What are some practical steps people can take to improve their security?
Well, one thing Bruce Schneier mentioned in his blog is that many of these attacks, like the device code phishing we talked about earlier, exploit features that are designed for convenience. It's this constant trade-off between security and usability.
And it seems like usability often wins out, which leaves us vulnerable.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's often the case. So one thing you can do is be more aware of this trade-off. Don't just click on links or enter codes without thinking about it. Ask yourself, does this request even make sense? Is this actually the website I was expecting? Being a little skeptical can go a long way.
That's a good point. We often talk about phishing attacks, but this adds a whole other layer to it. It's not just about recognizing shady emails anymore.
Exactly. And with password security, especially with all these info stealers going around, choosing a strong and unique password for each account is more important than ever. I know it can be a hassle, but using a password manager can really help.
But we were just talking about how password managers themselves are being targeted. So does that mean they're not safe to use?
Not necessarily. They still offer a lot of security benefits, but it's really important to choose one that really prioritizes security. And you need to take extra steps to protect your master password. Look for features like zero-knowledge encryption, end-to-end encryption, and consider using a strong passphrase instead of a simple password.
Okay, so it's about layering your defenses. Even if one layer fails, the others can still protect you.
Exactly. Multi-factor authentication is another really important layer. Whenever you can enable it for all your accounts, especially sensitive ones like banking and email, it makes it way harder for attackers to get in, even if they do manage to steal your credentials.
And it's not just about those codes you get through text messages either. There are more secure options out there like app-based authenticators and hardware security keys.
Absolutely. Those are much more secure because they're not as easily phished or intercepted.
Okay, so we've talked about being more careful online using strong passwords and multi-factor authentication. But how do we stay ahead when it comes to malware?
Keeping your operating system and all your software updated is super important. Patches often fix known vulnerabilities that attackers could use. Don't put off those updates.
And it's not just your computer either. It's all the other devices on your network too. Smartphones, tablets, even those smart home devices, they all need to be updated.
Right, and be really careful about what you download and install. Stick to sources you know and trust, and make sure to check that the software is legit before you install it. Cyberhoot recently reported a campaign where attackers were actually using Webflow, a legitimate website building platform, to host fake CAPTA screens.
Wow. So you think you're proving you're not a robot, but you're actually giving your information away.
Exactly. It just goes to show that attackers are always coming up with tricky ways to fool us.
And speaking of tricks, the Hacker News reported on a new version of the Snake Keylogger malware that's going around. This one's especially bad because it uses AutoIt scripting to avoid being detected.
AutoIt is a legitimate scripting language that's often used for automating tasks, but attackers are using it to hide their malicious code, which makes it harder for antivirus software to find it.
So even having antivirus software isn't enough anymore.
Right, layered security is key. This is where solutions like behavioral analysis, sandboxing, and machine learning come in. They can detect and block threats based on what they do, not just their signatures.
And Fortinet's 40-Yard Labs has actually seen a big jump in blocked infection attempts from this new Snake Keylogger. So it sounds like these advanced security solutions are working.
That's encouraging, but attackers never stop adapting. The Hacker News also reported on a campaign called Starry Dobry, where they're spreading fake game installers that have cryptocurrency miners hidden in them.
So you think you're getting the latest game, but you're really installing something that'll take over your computer.
Exactly. They're preying on people who are eager to try new games. This campaign has been especially active in Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Turkey.
It's a good reminder that we all need to be careful about what we download, even if it seems harmless like a game.
Yeah, and it highlights another trend, cryptojacking. Instead of stealing cryptocurrency, directly attackers are using malware to make your computer mine it for them.
So you might not even realize you're infected, but your computer will be slower and your electricity bill might be higher.
Exactly. It's a sneaky way for them to profit from your computer without you knowing.
So we talked about individuals, but what about organizations? What are the key takeaways for them with all these threats?
Well, one thing that really sticks out is how sophisticated and persistent attackers are getting. The story about the malware targeting that South American Foreign Ministry is a perfect example. This wasn't just some random attack. It looks like it was a planned operation, probably by a group backed by a nation state.
It really shows how important it is to not just focus on preventing attacks, but to also have strong ways to respond to incidents.
Absolutely. Organizations need to be prepared to detect, contain, and fix security incidents quickly and effectively. That means having the right tools and processes in place and a well-trained incident response team.
And it seems like living off the land tactics are becoming more common. How can organizations defend against attacks that use legitimate tools?
That's a tough one because you can't just block all legitimate tools. People wouldn't be able to get any work done. But there are things you can do. Security awareness training for employees is really important. They need to be able to spot suspicious activity, even if it seems to be coming from a trusted source.
So it's about teaching users to be more aware and to report anything that seems off.
Exactly. And from a technical standpoint, organizations need to have strong logging and monitoring capabilities. That way they can track what's happening on their systems and spot any unusual activity that could mean an attack, even if the attackers are using legitimate tools.
So you need to be able to see what's going on in your network and have the tools to look into anything suspicious.
Right. And endpoint security is another important piece. We talked about how even seemingly unimportant accounts can be targeted by attackers.
Because they could be used as a way to get into more important systems?
Exactly. So having strong endpoint security controls is essential. Things like antivirus software, firewalls, and intrusion detection systems.
And that protection needs to be everywhere, not just computers and servers, printers, scanners, mobile devices, and even IoT devices. They all need to be secured.
Absolutely. And it's not just about technology. Either organizational policies and procedures are really important too. Things like strong password policies, multi-factor authentication, and least privilege access can really lower the risk of being compromised.
So it's about having a well-rounded approach to security that uses technology, processes, and people.
Exactly. And it's something that you have to keep working on. The threats are always changing, so organizations have to keep adapting their security measures to stay ahead.
It's definitely a lot to keep up with, but it's crucial for protecting our digital stuff and making sure businesses can keep running in today's world.
I agree. And staying up to date on the latest threats and trends, like the ones we've been talking about today, is a big part of that.
Well, on that note, we've covered a lot today. Is there anything else you want to mention before we move on?
I think it's really important to remember that cybersecurity isn't just about technology and tools, it's about people. Attackers are always trying to figure out how to use human behavior to their advantage, whether it's phishing social engineering or they're taking advantage of our desire for convenience.
That's a really good point. So how can we reduce this risk that comes from humans?
Security awareness training is key, but it can't just be a yearly thing you do to check a box. It has to be engaging and relevant and something you do continuously. Organizations need to create a culture of security awareness where everyone understands their part in protecting information.
So empower people to be the first line of defense.
Exactly. And it's about creating a mindset where people are always thinking about the potential risks and taking steps to minimize them.
So it sounds like we need a change in our culture, not just our technology.
I think you're right. And that's probably the toughest challenge of all.
So we talked about all these threats that individuals and organizations are facing. But let's look at the bigger picture. InfoSecurity magazine had an article about Australia's intelligence chief. He's warning about espionage attempts that are targeting secrets related to that AUKUS nuclear submarine program.
Yeah, that's a high-stakes example of how cybersecurity is connected to geopolitical issues. Protecting sensitive information, especially when it comes to national security, is super important, especially with programs like AUKUS. Those involve partnerships between different countries.
It shows that cybersecurity isn't just about protecting data and systems. It's about protecting national interests and global stability as well.
Exactly. And these threats are always evolving too. InfoSecurity magazine also had a report about a new tactic that's being used by that Chinese espionage group, Mustang Panda. They're deploying malware through legitimate Microsoft tools, and they're even able to bypass ESET antivirus.
Wow. It's scary how these groups are finding ways to use trusted systems and tools. What can we even do to stay ahead?
It's a constant back and forth. Security vendors are always working to improve their detection methods, but attackers are just as determined to find ways around them.
So it goes back to layered security again. It seems like that's a really important theme.
It definitely is. There's no one solution that will solve everything. We need technology, processes, and people all working together to build a strong defense.
And speaking of technology help, Net Security had a useful guide on how to tighten up privacy and security settings on iOS 18. With new operating systems, there are new features, and it's important to use the ones that improve security.
Absolutely. Every little bit helps. And it's not just about individual devices. Fortinet announced some improvements to their FortiAnalyzer platform. They're boosting its threat hunting and incident response capabilities.
So they're giving security teams better tools to find, analyze, and respond to threats.
Exactly. And CardinalOps expanded their threat exposure management platform. It provides better visibility into security risks and automates risk scoring.
It sounds like the industry's realizing that we need more proactive and automated security solutions.
They are. With the growing number and complexity of attacks, manual processes just can't keep up.
And Edge Delta introduced something called security data pipelines. They help organizations process, analyze, and act on security data faster.
That's definitely a step in the right direction. Analyzing data in real time is crucial for quickly detecting and responding to threats.
And Pangea introduced a new AI security features to protect AI systems themselves, things like prompt injection and sensitive information disclosure.
That's an interesting development. As we start relying more on AI, we need to make sure those systems are secure too.
It feels like cybersecurity is getting more and more complex every day, but it's also an exciting field with constant innovation and new things happening all the time.
It is, and it's a field where we all have a role to play, whether we're security professionals, developers, business leaders, or just people who use technology in our everyday lives.
That's a great point. Well, I think this is a good place to wrap up our cybersecurity news roundup for today. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
Stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay ahead of the curve. And remember, cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. We all need to do our part to create a safer digital world for everyone.
Well said. Thanks for joining me today. It's been a great discussion. And to all our listeners out there, stay safe out there, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive into the world of cybersecurity.